So this week's Sidra is Shmot, or in English, names. The name of the Sidra, as with all Torah readings, is taken from the very first verse. And since the Sidra is named names, I want to begin the message in Shmot chapter 3, as it has a very important name written there. And it reads this way. And God answered Moses, I am who I am. And then he said, you are to say to Bnei Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, you are to say to Bnei Israel, Adonai, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I should be remembered from generation to generation. And here we have the name of God in parentheses, but notice that it's translated Adonai, because we don't know the pronunciation of the name. However, of late, there have been many differing attempts to pronounce the name of God. For centuries, the church has thought it was Jehovah, but not so. However, the Jewish people, as we're going to see in this message, have not pronounced the name for more than 2,500 years. But now Christians and the Hebrew roots teachers are trying to pronounce it with terms like Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, and nearly every other possibility under the sun, and some of those that aren't even possible. Each group, having their own pronunciation, claims to have the only true pronunciation of his name. The question for us today is, can you really know how to pronounce the name of God when it hasn't been pronounced anywhere by our Jewish people, but in the most holy place for 2,500 years? And so right away one has to ask himself, why all these different traditions for the sacred name, or as it's termed, the tetragrammaton? Who's correct? The question we should be asking ourselves today is not only can we really know how to pronounce the name of God, but more importantly, do you really want to know how to pronounce the sacred name in this present evil age? I'm going to try and answer those questions for you today. The answer to can you know how to pronounce this name is simple. No one knows the correct pronunciation. And what I want to show you today is that it hasn't been, as I said, pronounced by the Hebrews for more than 2,500 years, maybe longer. And how do we know that? Well, we can see in the Torah and the traditions that they didn't pronounce the name for at least 250 years before the coming of Yeshua, because we can look at the Septuagint and see what it says of Leviticus 24:16. This is how it reads in the TLV, or most Christian Bibles. Whoever blasphemes the name of Adonai must surely be put to death. This is how it's pronounced in the Septuagint. Whoever blasphemes the name of Adonai must be surely put to death. The whole congregation must stone him, the outsider as well as the native born. When he blasphemes the name, he must be put to death. That's the TLV translation, excuse me. And it's the way it's translated in most Christian Bibles, only they use the word Jehovah or Lord in caps. The TLV uses Adonai. There are a few who will use some of the other names that I spoke of. But here is the point. Notice that it says blasphemes the name. And in Hebrew, the word is nakab. And it means be designated, specified, curse, or blaspheme. And so it means to blaspheme, or it could just mean to be designated or specified. Now I want to go back 2,300 years or so to the writing of the Septuagint, and we're going to see how they translated it in this earliest translation, whether it meant blaspheme or specified. Here it is. Anyone who names the name of the Lord shall be put to death. Anyone who names or designates the name of the Lord. These rabbis thought it meant more than just blaspheme, but they said anyone who speaks the name shall be put to death. Now, I think that's a pretty good reason for not speaking it, right? The Hebrews did because they haven't spoken it since then at least. And so we can see that it hasn't been pronounced, the pronouncing of that, not pronouncing the name dates back to the Septuagint, which I said is almost 2,300 years, 250 years before the coming of Yeshua. And so no one pronounced the name of the Holy One. The fact is, if we look to the Messianic writings, we find no attempt to use the name of the Creator. And you can't blame it on the rabbis, because we can find reference to it in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. Giza Vermes, in his book, The Dead Sea Scrolls, notes this: anyone who speaks aloud the most holy name of God while reading a book or praying is to be expelled and never again to return to the council of Yahad. In other words, they're going to be removed from the community forever. And Giza dates this to be written around 100 BC. The point being, the SCs had the same understanding. And as we all know, they didn't really appreciate the Pharisees. They were totally set apart from rabbinic Judaism. And it tells us something else. It wasn't confined to just the Pharisees. Now I want to look at another ancient writing. This is the Targum Onkelos, written around the 1st century. And it says, whoever pronounces the name of Adonai shall surely be put to death. The entire community shall stone him, whether he is an alien or native born. Upon pronouncing the name of Adonai, he shall surely be put to death. And so we can also use our Messianic writings and the words of Messiah himself as an example. There are those who say if you pray your prayers are only heard if you use this name or that. Or you're more likely to receive an answer if you pray in that particular name of God. That's what many say. Yeshua didn't believe that. And so he writes, as his disciples ask him how to pray, he answers with this: therefore pray in this way, our Father in heaven, sanctified be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In this verse we find not only that Yeshua did not tell his disciples to use the sacred name when they prayed, but Yeshua tells his disciples to use Abba for the name of God. Why Abba, or Father, instead of the sacred name? Here we have two great opportunities for Yeshua to use the sacred name. First, instead of Father, and second, he could have said, sanctified be your, and then pronounced the name of God. But there's more. This verse also tells us why we should never even want to speak the name of God. As Yeshua says, sanctified be your name. What does he mean by sanctified? Well, that word in the Greek means to separate from the profane things and dedicate to God, to honor as holy. Yeshua regards God's name as holy, so holy that he agrees it's not to be spoken in this profane world. In the 1st century, the only place it was spoken was where there was no profanity whatsoever, in the most holy place, where no one heard it but Adonai and the high priest. Consider this: if it had been spoken just anywhere, and a Roman or other heathen heard it pronounced, and then they went out and spoke it, that would hardly be sanctifying his name. And I would add, the same is true today, and I'm going to show you that before this message is over. The next proof I want to make is, again, Yeshua didn't use the name of God, nor did the disciples. Yeshua never uses the sacred name, but always uses a circumlocution like heaven, most high, Abba, Father. Never the sacred name. Consider this: when we see the disciples pronounce the name Yeshua and write the name Yeshua, but never the sacred name. Why? Well, either they agreed with not pronouncing it, or more than likely, since it hadn't been spoken for about 300 years, they didn't even know what it was at this time. Consider this as well. They wrote the name Yeshua, or as it was further translated, Jesus, and Jesus has become a curse word among the profane of the world. You see, if it had been written so it could be pronounced, the sacred name had been written so it could be pronounced, the sacred name would too be a curse word in the world among the profane. And so the disciples sanctified the name by not writing it. Yeshua sanctified the name by not speaking it. And we also know they didn't teach it, because you can look at the ancient writings of the early church fathers, and there were nearly as many differing ways of writing it as there are today. And I could go on and explain how the church fathers and Nehemiah Gordon and others who came up with the name Jehovah or Yehovah made the mistake. They didn't understand the scribal traditions for adding vowels to the name of God. Couldn't be spoken. So what did they do? If you were reading Torah and you came across the name of God, you would see that it had vowel points of Adonai underneath it, which told you instead of saying the name of God, you were supposed to say Adonai. So there would be no mistake. If Adonai appeared along with the sacred name, the word Adonai or Lord appeared with the sacred name, then they would add the vowels of Elohim to the name. And so you would say Adonai Elohim. And I could explain how the church got the term Yahweh too, but I'm not going to do that today because of length. But the reason is simple. Yeshua and the disciples gave us the most important reason through their not using the sacred name. And that is, we are to sanctify the name. In order to sanctify the name, that means you would only use it in a place that's holy. A place where there's no possibility of it ever being profaned. And we can take a lesson from the high priest. He only spoke the sacred name once a year, on the holiest day of the year, in the one place, only in one place, and that's the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. The most holy place where there was nothing profane, where there was no one who would hear, who might hear and misuse the name of God by going out and using it profanely. And when we consider the high priest and Yeshua, our high priest, not using the name, we have a very good example and a very good reason for us to not use it either. But let's assume for a moment that we did know how to pronounce the name. And we went out and we did pronounce it. And with that understanding, let's ask ourselves a question. By pronouncing the name in this profane world, where the translation of Yeshua's name became a curse word, am I sanctifying the name as Yeshua sanctified the name? Because history tells us you can't pronounce it in a profane world and sanctify the name at the same time. You can be sure the person who hears it won't go out. You can't be sure that the person who hears it won't go out and use it in a profane world or in a profane fashion. And I say that because using of what they think is the name, Christians have led it to being profaned. Just as surely as Jesus is profaned millions of times a day. And I can prove it. I could give you several examples this morning, but because of time, I'm only going to give you one example. I found it the other day as I studied for this commentary. I was on YouTube, and I ran into a video of an imam being asked a question, an imam. He was asked if Yahweh and Allah were the same God. And he went on to explain they were one and the same. That said, Yahweh was the church's way of pronouncing Allah. I can't think of a greater profanity of the name of God than that. To say that Allah, who is for not annihilating Everyone who doesn't believe in Allah could be the same as as our God who sent Yeshua to save everyone in this world. If the church was not so insistent on using that particular pronunciation of the name in their writings and sermons and just conversations, that profanity would have never happened. So you have to ask yourselves if our pronouncing what we think is the name is more important than what we think the name of God is. It's more important than it's not being profaned in this world. And I want to close with one more thing. I want to show you how unnecessary it is. As an example, when I begin a prayer with Abba or Father, I can tell you exactly who I'm speaking of, and the Holy One, blessed be He, knows exactly who I'm speaking to. When I say thank you, Adonai, for all you've done in my life and keeping your hand on me all my days, I am speaking to the Holy One, who was the one who did those things. And the Holy One of Israel knows I'm praising Him. He knows that I know that His name is to be sanctified and that I'm sanctifying His name in an unholy world. Shabbat Shalom.